Hey guys, I'm FatBuddyCat, and this is a mini dirt track racer. Well, I guess this is like any other bridge. You gotta start from one side to get to the other. We're gonna work our way from the brakes over to the tensioner. It's been so long since I've done these. I literally don't remember. I know these two bolts come off, and then you have the two pads and a spring in between. I think you have to take the tension off of the mechanism itself. To do that, push it back, get that cable out of that block there. Hold on. Yeah. And then we should be able to pull this around, and it's ours. This is that cap with the two bolts. Here's the used brake pads. There's the spring. Here's two brand new brake pads. When you look at these, they're actually not too bad. I mean, this one's obviously better, but I don't think these brakes were ever adjusted to their most efficient working capacity. I know I didn't mess with them, but you know, we'll probably end up throwing those out, but for right now we'll put them on the side for a rainy day and we'll get these in. The spring goes between them like that so that it doesn't, well, see what I mean? I actually forget. Yep, I was wrong. Not afraid to admit it. The spring actually goes the other way, and it pockets itself in the groove on the pad, and you can see my frustration on the caliper itself. You then have to get the other pad the same way, right? While working the magical cover on there and aligning the bolt holes. Definitely going to take two hands. Good thing I'm a certified semi-professional. I was able to get that on my first attempt. I even dropped one of the bolts on the floor. Pressed it together so that it couldn't come off, and then worked the other bolt that I did have, and even with all that drama, I was able to get her done. Once the caliper is reattached to the cable, we're only two bolts from glory. We're going to set the pads over the rotor itself and line the holes up. I got to find the two bolts. If your sweet new brake pads won't fit over your rotor, like mine, you're going to have to adjust the cable. There's one adjuster right in the middle, and another one up on the handlebars. I'll start with the handlebars. Okay, this adjuster is all the way in. Now I'll go back and see. Yep, no problem. There's my swap out for the hardware. Obviously, those are the stock bolts, and That's the upgrade. I'm going to put just a dab on the last few threads. Alright, once those are tight, you can now attempt to roll the mini bike. I can feel that my pads are still scrubbing the rotor. I'm using these two bolts to center my pads on the caliper. It's kind of hard to get you. There you go. Yeah, right there. You see how centered I am? You get that with these. If we turn them out, a wrench here, it should bring the pad closer to the rotor. You see it? We're touching the rotor. So I'm going to turn these ones back in until I'm centered again. I just split the difference with this adjuster and the one at the handlebars. It activates right about there, and I'd really be pulling hard to go past that, so I'd be engaging the pads on the rotor pretty well. It's hard to tell with the belt, but we're getting close, and probably where I'd be comfortable to at least ride it before I mess with it anymore. Moving on. Now we're going to work on the crankcase ventilation system. We're also going to be swapping out the manifold for that flex job that I have up here. It would behoove us to remove all of this, do that, and then work our way out. I removed my pull starter so that I could spin my flywheel and find top dead center on my valves. Made sure my lash was right where I wanted it. We're going to be sealing this thing up. That way we know it's good for a while. The next part is going to be a billet extension. That is going to have a barb to receive our crankcase vent that is plumbed onto a barb that is threaded into my crankcase cover. The OMB Warehouse billet valve cover extension is pre-threaded, and it comes with a plug as well as one of these barbs. I just put a little bit of RTV on my threads and tightened it in. I'm just running a rubber gasket on the bottom and a cork on top. If this style doesn't work out, we'll have to cut a freshie, but I think we're going to be alright. The 1/4 inch barb that goes into the extension is going to be plumbed into this hose, which relieves our internal pressure. It brings it back to the top of the head and that pressure then needs to be relieved. I tapped the valve cover out with a 1/4 18 NPT, and then I installed a 3/8 barb. That 3/8 barb is going to go to a hose that has an external PCV valve. Here's what it looks like, pre-assembled. That's the same way I put them on. It's a whole lot easier than trying to hold everything in place and then stick your bolts in when, you know, it's all up in here. I just ran a brand new 1/4-inch Tygon hose and connected those 2 barbs. My braided hose for the PCV valve was a little shorter than I liked, and I could have gone to the store and got another one, but to save gas and time, I just used one of those double barbed unions there and added a couple more clamps. Why not? I'm going to put a filter on the end, and I'm just using a small piece of vinyl tubing to fill up the void in between. We're just going to leave this hanging out right here for now. Once we install the gas tank, we'll come back and mount this right about there. Just a couple zip ties, nothing fancy. And as long as we are uphill from our exit spot on the valve cover, we'll be okay. That way, if any oil gets out, it splashes by and comes up, it can run back down. Alright, onto the manifold. This oddly cut piece is to create a nice smooth transition for the inside radius. On the inside of this tube, you can see the end of the other half of this manifold over here. Okay, you can see, yeah, it's a corner, and you're sticking a straight tube in, so it doesn't exactly transfer while it's going this direction. All of this cleans that up so that when our air and our fuel is passing through, there is little to no restriction besides what happens at the port itself going into the bowl. Once the initial manifold is attached at the port and completely tightened, you slide the silicone over as far as you can, right up to the heads of the bolts there, and then we tighten on a clamp. The nice thing about 3-piece, you loosen the other end and you pull this manifold with you. You can then attach your carburetor to this, come back, slide it on, hit it with the clamp, and it is super tight. It's not coming off anytime soon. Not easy anyway. Since this manifold may be prone to a little more vibration by nature, I decided to cut out a gasket. I actually used this one before, but it's pretty sturdy material, and I think she's good for another go. It's just going to go between the two flanges. Everything else is just like installing a VM22, basically. This is butter. It slides way on, and the silicone tube goes between the two flange bolts that I used. Also with nylock nuts and lock washers. It's beautiful. Oh yeah, this will work great, guy. So I definitely thought the radius was a little tighter and that this would kick back a little closer. Not so much. I mean, we're out there, but hey, it's kind of cool. It's already on there, and I mean, it does all of that, and it's not going to fall off. So you might kick the filter off, but you're probably not going to pull the carburetor off. Maybe it's not that bad after all. We'll see. Next, we're going to have to work the throttle cable. This could be difficult or it could be easy. We're going to try to go direct. I'm just using the same yellow grips that I had on the vintage mini bike, as well as the thumb throttle. I'm going to run the throttle cable down behind my number plate, alongside the frame, and up under the seat, and then back through and out where that little gapperino is. Well, that plan went direct all right. Directly out the window. None of these thumb throttle cables that I have with the Mikuni style end had the proper amount of cable coming out the end. So, see you later. I should have gone with quality in the first place. Grey Goat Garage and my friends over at OMBWarehouse.com hooked it up with a fresh set of these Built-Well recoil grips, as well as a brand new Mikuni throttle cable. I ran it the exact same way. The only difference is I have my zip ties installed. I also started to run my brake where I'm going to want that, and this one is for my kill switch. Up here, everything is set. I'll finish up with my zip ties and we'll move on to the next part. Over on the opposite side of the mini bike, the last thing we're going to do is attempt a working tensioner. We're only after this little bit of slack on the bottom. I have one of those generic pressed out, barely welded together offset tensioners. This one had one of those hard plastic cheese ball idler wheels on it. I replaced it with one that has a bearing, except it's even higher quality than this. we're going to be passing a bolt through. We're going to attempt to hang it from the stock tensioner mount. Here's the bolt. There's our hole. That wouldn't work. So we're going to incorporate a couple steel bushings. These side by side are just ever so slightly wider than the piece that they give you, this piece here. There you go. So, if we put a washer on both ends of that is slightly larger, right? So those can't come out. This should pivot on those between the two washers. Then we just have to hold them together. We'll use the bolt, washer, it'll pass through, you know, washer, bushing, washer. And then I have a nylock nut for the other end. Sometimes principles are easier to understand when you see them in action. With this able to move side to side because our bushing is ever so slightly longer, we can really tighten that grade 8 bolt. The idler wheel falls absolutely perfect on that EK 420 chain. Yeah, buddy. Now we just need something to keep it live. Here's what I came up with. I found a spring that had a hook on each end, and it's not the wussiest spring in the world. I hooked one end around my tensioner. You can see it down here. It's just hung over it. It's not, you know, permanently attached. And then I took a bolt with a lock washer and a nut threaded onto it, pulled those back onto the bolt, threaded the end into the threaded section that was on that stock chain tensioner tang that I left on there. Remember? Huh? So that works as a perfect place to attach the spring. I'm going to bring the spring over towards the tang, and when I tighten that nut onto that washer, it'll lock this whole thing in place. To make this a little more secure, we're going to drill a hole nice and low and just south of our idler wheel. That way we can loop the spring through, pull it up over our stubby, our stud, that's what that is, our stud up here. And then we can send that home a little, not too tight so that we crimp it, but enough that it won't just pop off either. Any lower than that and you might as well just cut a groove. It's going to be favoring the heavy side of the cyborg meat anyway. Send it. Well, I got the spring over the tensioner no problem. It pulls away from everything, including the idler wheel, when it's in the up position. The issue is, if I hang the spring flush on this tang, it won't touch the cross member. If we put this on and we do the old lock nut and make the stud thing, we could hang it over, but it's going to pull the spring this way and it's going to drag right there. So what if we don't even use the bolt? Let's see if I can grab this thing and pull our spring through the hole. We're definitely not touching anything. When this chain goes live, I mean, look at it right now. When this chain goes live, it's going to go like that, and it's going to activate the tensioner. At all times, it's slightly under tension, and we're not stretching the heck out of our spring. But wait, there's more. What if we add a tensioner to our tensioner? Watch this move. Very simple, yet very effective. Extended the location for the end of the spring about 1 inch, maybe 1.5 inches. We brought it back so that it's pulling at a better angle on our pivot. The chain up top is right where we want it, and we have a nice, powerful tensioner down below. Did I say last thing? What was I thinking? Oh, this really isn't a thing. It's more of a quick attempt at a repair. I'm looking back at the way our cable loops into the top of the carburetor, and I don't really like that. I want to see if I can stiffen this up somehow. There you go. Try to wrap your noggin around that. We now have a cable inside of a conduit that's inside of a conduit that's technically inside of another conduit right here to make that transition. We have another transition here. We go to the fatter tubing. This is 1/2 inch outside, 3/8 inside. This is 1/4 inch inside, 3/8 outside. So it all works out. Real proud of that. Let's hook it up. See if it works. If I do any better than that, I'm going to start to cry. It's just beautiful, man. We only have a few things left to do. I better pull it together. But then again, it is a work in progress. Have a good night, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. I want you to stay.